Hello and welcome back to Rob's Movie Reviews. This week I'm going to review a movie for you that's one of my all-time favorites in the horror genre. It's a movie I never get tired of watching it. It's a great watch. I really enjoy it. I save a lot of my horror movies for around Halloween time, but this one I always end up pulling out watching 3 or 4 times every year because it's just so much fun. It's a little film that came out in 1984 called Return of the Living Dead. This was a great movie. It's a lot of fun. It's around that time when in Hollywood they really started to experiment with mixing comedy and horror together in films. And it really worked with this particular movie. They went out and got some very experienced Hollywood actors to be in this film. They got the incredible James Karen. They got Don Calfa. And there's one other gentleman, I can't think of his name right now off the top of my head, but he was also a very well experienced Hollywood actor, as well as they got Linnea Quigley, who had already, by the time she appeared in this film, had earned the title of the Hollywood Scream Queen. Now, this film is it's pretty funny, man. It's comes off of the Night of the Living Dead series. The producer of the film, who I'm not exactly sure of his name at the moment, I'm sorry, I'm a little unprepared. Didn't do my homework. I'm kind of running behind this week. Normally, I would know it, but anyway, he had worked on the Night of the Living Dead films, or on Night of the Living Dead with George Romero, and then there was somewhat of a falling out between the two of them. They each went in their own direction. He retained the rights to Living Dead, the words Living Dead. That's why the rest of George Romero's movies are all just The Dead. But anyway, this film starts out a young man, excuse me, by the name of Freddie, gets a job in a medical warehouse. Uh, he medical warehouse supply building. He works in the warehouse with a guy named Frank, who is played by James Callan. And after teaching Freddie, at the end of his first day, they're sitting in the office. He's kind of showing him how to fill out shipping forms. And Freddie asks him, "What's one of the strangest things you ever saw?" And in the warehouse, and that's when Frank proceeds to tell him the story of how the movie Night of the Living Dead was actually based on a true story, and that all the facts were changed around. That actually there was a chemical spill at a VA hospital in Pittsburgh, and they kept it quiet, kept it hushed. And when the movie came out, of course, all the facts were changed, and the corpses that supposedly got up and walked around in the morgue were put into steel drums designed by the Army Corps of Engineer and were supposed to be shipped back to the chemical company that had made the chemical for disposal, but instead, because of a typical Army screw up, got shipped to their supply warehouse instead and have been in the basement ever since. He takes Freddie down to the basement. They're looking at the barrels. Looking through the glass, they can see the corpses looking up at them. And Freddie asks Frank, "Are these things tight? You know, do they leak?" Frank's like, "Oh, come on, kid. These things don't leak." And he smacks the side of the drum, and of course, poisonous gas shoots out right in each of them's faces, and they collapse. Then we go to a bunch of young teenagers looking for a place to party, and we come to find out one of them is Freddie's girlfriend, and they all decide to go over to the warehouse and pick Freddie up when he gets off from work. In the meantime, back at the warehouse, Freddie and Frank have come to realize what has happened and already are noticing that, like, the cadavers in the cooler are coming to life. The different animals that they dead animals that they keep cooled at the warehouse to ship to veterinary schools are coming back to life. So they call their boss in. They try to destroy this cadaver that's running around wreaking havoc in the warehouse, and they find out that hitting it in the brain doesn't kill it like the movies claimed. So they chop him up into little pieces, but the little pieces just keep on coming after him. So they take the pieces over to a mortuary next door, where the boss is Freddie and Frank's boss has a friend that runs a mortuary, and he agrees to let him use the crematorium. And unwittingly, in doing so, when all the smoke goes out of the stack of the crematorium, it begins to rain outside, and the chemical is in the smoke, which then gets brought back down with the rain into the cemetery. And lo and behold, you've got hundreds of corpses popping out of the ground. The teenagers were waiting for Freddie to get off from work. They're chased by the corpses. It just gets crazy. They get chased. Some of them, they split up. Some of them go to the warehouse. Some of them go to the mortuary. Linnea Quigley, her character, gets killed in the cemetery, and she comes back as a zombie. And it's just they call for an ambulance to come and check on Freddie and Frank at the mortuary. They're not aware of what's happening outside. When they get there, they start running vitals on them and find out that Freddie and Frank are actually already dead. They have no pulse, they have no blood pressure, they're not breathing. They have already died, and they're coming back already. They just haven't evolved into the state of being zombies yet, but it's soon to come. Now, the difference with the zombies in this film as opposed to the George Romero zombies, these zombies are fast movers. They can talk, they can think, and instead of eating human flesh, all human flesh, they're specifically after one thing, and that is the brains of living humans. They must have brains. We find out later on in the film, when they capture one of the zombies and interrogate it, that eating brains takes away the pain of being dead. Apparently, it hurts to be dead. The brain, they can feel themselves rotting, and the brain, eating brains, takes that pain away. This is a great fun movie. It's chock full of hilarious scenes, while at the same time there's some scenes that are really frightening. It was directed by Dan O'Bannon, who previously had this movie was his directorial debut. Prior to this film, he'd primarily just been a screenwriter. He has some pretty big films to his credit. He wrote the screenplay for Alien and its sequel, Aliens. He also wrote or co-wrote the screenplay for the Arnold Schwarzenegger 1980s blockbuster Total Recall. Dan O'Bannon did a wonderful job with this film. Like I said, James Karen and Don Calfa, two very well-known, seasoned veteran actors who really serve as mentors and guides for the rest of the cast, which is pretty much a bunch of young, unknown Hollywood talent, with the exception of Linnea Quigley. But with them there to help guide these young people and mentor them, and just a well-written, funny yet scary screenplay, it just all comes together into what I truly consider a horror comedy masterpiece. This was a film that, though the Living Dead, the Night of the Living Dead, and then the rest of the Romero films had a very strong following, it was more of a cult following. This film, I think, more than any other film in the 1980s, really helped bring the zombie subgenre in the horror genre into the mainstream of American pop culture. So that's going to be that's pretty much the review of Return of the Living Dead. Join me back here next week. I'll have another review for you, and until then, you all take care.